This mind map will explore the Module 4 content on how learning shapes our behaviour. Firstly, let's talk about what learning isn't. Reflexes and instincts are not considered learned behaviours. Reflexes are automatic unconscious physical responses like flinching or blinking, and instincts are hardwired behaviours such as the fight, flight, or freeze response that aid survival. So what is learning? Learning is a behaviour change caused by an experience or an accumulation of experiences. Why is learning so important? Theorists suggest that learning is an adaptive process. It allows us to adapt and respond to different circumstances in order to survive and thrive in our environment. There are two main types of learning, non-associative and associative. Non-associative learning differs from associative learning as it occurs through simple exposure to a stimulus, whereas non-associative learning occurs when we connect different stimuli and/or events. To start with, let's look at non-associative learning. As you can see, there are two types, habituation and sensitization. Habituation occurs when our brain decreases responsiveness to a stimulus after repeated exposure, which allows us to give our attention to more important sensory information. The opposite of this is sensitization. Have you ever been tucked up in bed at night waiting to drift off to sleep when you suddenly hear a tap dripping? It's all you can hear and impossible to tune out. This is sensitization, and whilst this example is a rather annoying manifestation, it does serve a survival purpose because it usually occurs when we have an exaggerated response to a dangerous or painful stimuli. Now to associative learning. This occurs when we learn to connect different events or stimuli with one another based on repeated experience. Have you ever heard of Pavlov's dogs? Welcome to classical conditioning, learning by association. Classical conditioning involves an unconditioned stimulus and an unconditioned response. In the case of Pavlov, his dog's food was the unconditioned stimulus and the unconditioned response was that the dogs drooled. Over time, he introduced a bell to the feeding time routine. This was the conditioned stimulus. This then resulted in a conditioned response from the dogs to salivate at the sound of the bell. So a previously neutral stimulus, the bell, became associated with the original stimulus, the food. Ethically on the nose in this case, but it was also demonstrated in John Watson's famous Little Albert experiment. Next, we have operant conditioning. The easiest way to remember operant conditioning is to connect it with rewards and consequences. It's associated with more complex behaviors in classical conditioning. In the 1800s, Thorndike proposed his law of effect, which states that negative consequences weaken an association and positive reinforcement strengthens an association. For example, receiving a speeding ticket may make you less inclined to speed the next time you're driving. So there we have it, a very brief insight into the fascinating world of learning.